Hey guys, this is my first post on here. I found an old box of tapes from when my dad used to work at a radio station. Now, you might be asking me, why am I typing this here if it's in audio format? It's pretty simple. I don't know how to convert them into audio files. They are all in cassettes, so it was a pain in the ass. But I wrote everything down on those tapes. So, I apologize if some of them don't make sense. If anyone wants to narrate them, then feel free. If I figure out how to convert them into audio files, I will post them on YouTube, but that'll probably be later. Anyway, I had to listen to some of them. The radio show was called The Cultist's Den. It seemed to be an alternative rock station that had a horror leaning to it. Something that I haven't really seen before was that they would do horror stories at the end of their broadcast. A couple of them had one song on them, which seemed like hard rock or metal. However, most of them are just stories. Anyway, I will copy and paste the story here. Have fun, I guess. An unexpected burglar. Radio show host.
Hello again, listeners. Wasn't that a great show tonight? Sadly, we have to wrap up soon. If I could, I would do another hour of beautiful music, but alas, we are slaves to time. However, I won't leave you without something special. I'm closing the night with a horror story titled An Unexpected Burglar, narrated by James.
Burglar. I know I was never a good person, but at least I was sane. In fact, I was once nominated for a writing credit in my 8th grade class. But that's besides the point. Do you want to know about July 29th, 1998, right? You're curious about how I ended up in the loony bin for your little radio show? What the hell? No one believes me anyway. So, let me think about what happened first. Oh, do you want me to tell you today's date? Alright, I can do that. Today is November 1st, 2000. And here's my story about how I went insane. Back then, I was a burglar at the peak of my career and life. I did it for pleasure and sometimes for work. This particular job was for pleasure. I didn't know the homeowner, and I didn't know anyone who hated him. I just knew he was rich. His house was big, and I could take whatever I wanted. There was barely any security, too. I could tell this was gonna be an easy job, and it was. I waited until nightfall to begin my work. He only had one camera, which was easy to sneak by. Definitely not in a good position to catch anyone. I went around to the back, picked the lock on the back door, and entered the house. From what I remember, everything inside was very tacky and not particularly valuable. While I was quietly rummaging through the drawers, I suddenly heard something behind me. At first, I thought I heard someone take a deep breath. But when I looked behind me, no one was there. I decided to keep searching the drawers, but then I heard another breath. I quickly looked back again and saw nothing. I continued to search for where the breath was coming from. The third breath came from the dining room near the back door. There was still nothing there. But then I heard that breath again. I took out my flashlight and shined it in the direction I thought the sound was coming from. At first, there was nothing, but when I turned the light to the left, I saw the shadow of an invisible man. I slowly started to walk toward the shadow. It didn't move from that spot. At least, I thought it was a he. When I reached out to touch it, it felt slimy. Suddenly, it screamed. I would have preferred it to be human. However, that was not the case. It was more like a mix of a child's scream, a chainsaw, and a weed whacker. Somehow, its head split in half down the middle, and out of the two sides there seemed to be a row of sharp, jagged, needle-like teeth. All the while the scream intensified. Panicking, I grabbed my knife, and I'll admit, I don't really remember much of what happened next. I just recall screaming, stabbing, and trying to kill it. I thought I had scratched it with my little pocket knife, but I couldn't be sure. The next thing I knew, the homeowner, a fat old man, came down the stairs with a 12-gauge shotgun and exclaimed,
"What the hell are you doing in my house?"
Shortly after, the police arrived and they arrested me. I testified, telling them everything that had happened, and they ended up placing me in the looting bin. I've been here for nearly 3 years now. I hope my little story gives you enough material for your show. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you choke on it. Radio show host.
And that was An Unexpected Burglar. We hope to see you next time in the cultist's den. Have a good night now, and don't let the bedbugs bite, along with everything lurking under your bed. Toodaloo. And what do we have here?
The man sneered. I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. The sound of the cocking of his gun had left me frozen in fear. The lights turned on, revealing a luxurious living room, and the door just 5 steps away.
What do you have in your hand?
The man asked.
My Rolex. Good choice.
Please, don't kill me.
How old are you, boy?
I'm 19.
19.
He sighed.
My God. Young and stupid. Not like me. I'm a lawyer, you see. Quite influential. But do you know one of the first things we teach our students, even before we teach them about theft?
Please, I said. Please, I'll put it back. Just let me go.
Let me finish my story first.
I stared at the door. 5 steps.
You see, if you kill someone, You do not automatically commit murder, according to German law.
The man said.
No, it's manslaughter. For it to become murder, you have to meet one or more of 6 criteria.
He sounded dead serious now, like a judge reading your sentence.
It's murder if you kill cruelly, or if you kill to satisfy your sexual needs. I think we're in the clear on that one.
Please, I did it for my parents. My vision blurred. I was crying. I just wanted to do something useful for once.
It's murder if you kill because you enjoy killing. The man inhaled sharply. I guess they got me there. Anyway, it's murder if you kill in order to gain money. I'll be fine on that, unless I rob your sorry corpse.
If I ran in the middle of his monologue, I could make it. Maybe. I just had to be quick.
It's murder if you kill while the other one doesn't see it coming,
he continued.
Well, if I shoot you in the back, that doesn't look too good for me.
I had to get my feet to move. I had to try. I had no other choice.
It's murder if you kill because of lower motifs. This one can mean just about anything. I think hating your poor ass might be a low motif. But on the other hand, they already have me for enjoying killing. So, doesn't really matter anyway. And it's also murder if I kill you in a way that endangers the general public. Good on that front. But hey, I definitely met some of the criteria. So they'll convict me for murder. That would be unfortunate.
I exhaled. He clicked his tongue.
But there is one way to get around all of this.
A bang. I whimpered. There was a hole in the entrance door now.
Self-defense,
the man exclaimed.
Shooting a fleeing thief if he steals something valuable, if he leaves you no other choice. I tried to warn you. I even fired a warning shot. And now?
Please. He chuckled.
Now, I think you should try to run.
I was awoken by the sounds of someone moving around downstairs, and initially thought it was my husband. It took my sleep-deprived brain a few seconds to remember that he was off on a business trip. I lay cowering under the covers as I heard voices downstairs and footsteps slowly coming up the stairs. I jumped out of my bed and ran towards the panic room in the corner. I heard someone rushing towards me and let out a sigh of relief as the door closed moments before they could reach me. I stood there, panting, while thanking the gods we had bought a home with a panic room. I gazed over at the cameras lining the walls to see maybe half a dozen masked men wandering about the house. I practically jumped out of my skin when I heard movement behind me, but I spun around and there was no one there. My eyes returned to the cameras and I found one showing myself in the panic room, who was shrouded in darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I spotted someone watching me from the corner of the room. I braced myself before turning around, but still seeing no one. My gaze returned to the screen to see two people standing there, watching me. They emerged from the shadows, and my eyes widened as the two clowns stood inches behind me. Their faces were painted white with big red noses. They were so close behind me that if I walked backwards, then I would step on their big clown shoes. I risked a peek behind me, but I still couldn't see anyone there. I flinched away as one of them raised a horn and blew it in my ear. Their laughter sent a shiver up my spine, as it seemed almost demonic. I watched in fear on the monitor as they moved forward and stood directly in front of me. I could smell the pungent stench of rotten meat on their breath. My eyes wandered the cameras as the burglars searched my home, stealing anything that wasn't tied down. My attention was drawn back to the monitor inside the panic room, as the clowns now stood on either side of me. I was barely able to suppress a scream as I felt their tongues begin to caress my cheeks. I stood there paralyzed with fear as they forced their tongues inside my nostrils. Their tongues withdrew after a few minutes, leaving me shaking uncontrollably. It took all of my willpower not to collapse on the floor and curl up into a ball. My eyes returned to the monitor as one of them moved in front of me and placed a flower in his jacket. I had a moment to wonder what he was doing before he squeezed it and a fountain of liquid sprayed out. I began screaming in pain as the liquid began burning through my flesh, and within seconds I could see part of the bone in my arm where it landed. Laughter shook the room as they took great merriment in my predicament. Two hands suddenly latched onto my body and held me in place, while another two began caressing my face. Their grip released after a minute, and I sunk to the floor, hyperventilating. My gaze shifted to the door, and I began crawling towards it. I was forced to stop a few times, as I could feel their breath on my face. I finally reached the door and let out a scream of joy as it opened beneath my grasp. I fell onto the floor of my bedroom, sobbing with joy. I barely had time to celebrate before the masked men charged into the room. I could feel the confusion emanating from them as they stared down at me. They quickly disregarded it as they moved inside the panic room. Their screams started within seconds and were brutally silenced one by one. One of them began crawling out and began pleading with me to help them. His body was then forcibly dragged back inside, and I listened on as his screams died off. I lay on the floor until the sun rose, and the room was bathed in sunlight. I pushed myself off the floor and walked into the bedroom and walked into the bathroom. I practically recoiled as I spotted my own reflection in the mirror. Clown makeup and a big red nose adorned my face. My eyes were drawn to the corner of the glass as I could see the two clowns standing in the panic room watching me. One of them raised the blood-soaked remains of a burglar's arm and waved it at me before they slammed the door. I climbed back into bed while remembering how abusive my husband could be and wondering if I should introduce him to our roommates. Casing an affluent neighborhood in the suburbs for an easy score, the three felons noticed a luxury SUV parked by itself in the driveway. The large property at the edge of the ritzy subdivision had tasteful decorations outside. The hedges were expertly manicured, and all of the interior lights were out. In their line of work, it was a promising sign. A family with that nice a vehicle and extra cash to spend on extravagant lawn maintenance would definitely own more than one car. It was summer vacation season. They were probably not at home. The exterior lighting illuminated the upscale dwelling, but not in an overtly attention-drawing sort of way. Being isolated and apparently vacant made the focus of their stakeout the perfect target for their nefarious purposes. The next door neighbors wouldn't pay any attention to the clean-out crew's meticulously orchestrated intrusion. Once it went down, it would be an in-and-out, meticulous process. They were seasoned criminals with a job to do. Professional thieves like them knew which items could be fenced or pawned, and what wasn't even worth carrying out the front door. After scrutinizing the prime location for a couple of hours, there had been no sign of occupancy. It was time to get the larceny underway. The locksmith jimmied open the back door at 2 a.m. It was always important to confirm no alarm systems were active, and that the home was empty. Only after preliminary tasks were accomplished would they take the time to leisurely explore the premises. With luck, they would uncover a safe, fur coats in the closets, jewelry, electronics, or other valuables. The scout shrewdly crept upstairs and confirmed the whole floor was vacant. A similar sweep of the ground level cleared those rooms of any unwanted surprises too. They saw themselves as opportunistic collectors of things which didn't belong to them. Not hardened, violent criminals with no hesitation to harm those who got in the way. carrying a firearm or knife was a necessary part of their Robin Hood operation. They would murder anyone who saw their faces to silence them. No witnesses to add to their extensive records and rap sheet was the unspoken creed. The basement was the last remaining realm to secure before they started collecting souvenirs. It didn't have any windows, so they were unable to confirm its vacant status earlier from their exterior surveillance. Impatient to get things underway, all three went downstairs. Despite their normal one man at a time protocol, confirming the last remaining areas there were unoccupied was merely a formality. It was 2 a.m. If anyone was at home, they would be upstairs in bed. None of the darkly dressed thieves noticed at the time, but the heavy-duty basement door closed behind them with a secure thud. They crept downstairs and swept their flashlights around for one final visual inspection. The harsh beams of light cut through the darkness and revealed a number of rather unusual things within the spacious homestead. But they were too focused on looking for people to dwell on the strange structures. The industrial-themed basement decor was downright bizarre and didn't match the rest of the house at all. But the robbers weren't in the business of critiquing the homes they burglarized. If they had dared to flip on a light switch, they would have witnessed very troubling details around them indeed. The sort of frightening things which would cause grown men to scream for their lives and scramble for the door. Unfortunately, they were bewitched by a massive open doorway leading toward a tantalizingly hidden room. The size and overall appearance of which rivaled that of a commercial bank vault. It was this irresistible enchantment and burning greed which led to dire, unforeseen circumstances. Without warning, the masterfully orchestrated plan to bait and ensnare violent home invaders was complete. Boom. The door slammed shut, and 3 thieves were trapped inside like rats, locked in a cage. In their absolute panic, they ran back to the huge iron door and beat on it until their fists were bloody. But it was of no use. A downward spiraling series of moral failings on their part delivered them to this poetic, fatal predicament. The neighborhood and state was finally a little bit more safe because 3 hardened felons were no longer free to collect other people's souvenirs.